So hello everyone, welcome to the first roadmap review for the Scalability Observability team. To Sam's point just then, there is an agenda that we've put together here. If I can find it, there we go. I wanted to start just by doing a bit of an introduction to kind of some of the tools that we've started using over the last couple of months, specifically in regards to the issues that we're using and the board as well, just to get everyone familiar with that. So let me just start a quick screen share. Okay, hopefully you can see the agenda doc. Perfect. So firstly, like the main thing driving kind of this new process is the roadmap issue that we have. This is something that is manually updated at the moment. Actually saw a good question from Stephanie about that yesterday. So thanks for that, Stephanie. The idea is, I think, over time, as this starts to become like more of a predictable process, we can probably automate some of the generation of this. Roadmap is broken down for different teams. So there's one for us in observability. There's a similar issue for practices as well. It highlights the things that are currently in progress. So these are the things that are primarily covered in the grand review. And then a list of kind of all of the things that we think are coming up next or later. This is quite interesting in terms of some of the things that are coming up next. We have epics created for already, whereas some of the things we don't, right? And I don't think there's necessarily like a clear stack ranking of these at the moment. My guess is that there's probably some things that we'll work on which haven't got epics created yet, which kind of come higher priority than some of these things. And that's possibly a discussion we'll have a bit later in the call. Additionally, so this links through to an epic board that we've been using. So this gives a good view of kind of like current state. Obviously, it is up to date as per all of the workflow labels and shows what's in progress for us as a team. So it's a really good, clear view of that. Also shows all of the projects that are ready, which incidentally isn't a project at the moment. So we need to try and move some stuff over into that list. Also, I think one of the things I've added to the agenda to talk about is the difference between sort of the preparation labels between backlog, triage, and proposal. There's 30 issues or epics in total here. I would bet that many of them aren't quite in the right columns. I think a lot of them probably will need kind of further triage before moving to proposal and ready. And I think that's something for us to look at. Additionally, actually, some of these might not even be a high priority for us at the moment. So I think we need to do a bit of a clean up here as well. All of this, as everyone does already know, kind of forms up into the primary epic that we use for the team and displays everything in here. In terms of the workflow labels, the proposal label is what causes things to show in the next section. So we have a couple of things here. And then I think we also have, a triage section as well. Only this is another kind of thing in terms of what we've been thinking about in terms of how we organize projects. Only epics that are direct descendants of the top level epic will, I think, appear in this section, which again is something else for us to think about going forwards, because at the moment and I think this is something that Sam's been doing quite a lot of, moving kind of like future planned work into either one of the kind of area or category specific roadmaps, or moving stuff onto the opportunity backlog as well. I actually wouldn't mind, Sam, if you talk a bit about the opportunity backlog, but I also want to respect the agenda. And I think, Andreas, you've added a point about the workflow labels.
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of days ago. We could use a backlog label in the sense that for things that are basically not for our current attention in terms of like either progressing them from triage, picking them up, working on them, and getting them done, basically. Or for things that are stuck in that process where we talked about something and there's a proposal, but it's been there for like half a year. Most likely we don't currently care about it anymore. Maybe that gives us a bit of sort of focus on those different stages also, in a sense that if there are things in triage, if there's something in proposal, then this is sort of top of mind for us as a team to discuss and detail more. And I think currently a good part of these would probably have to go to backlog because we're currently not really discussing them. Yeah, but that was just a discussion earlier this week. I don't know if that makes total sense overall.
I think one of the top kind of items in backlog there is the perfect example of, we do want to provide stage groups with Redis usage information. Absolutely. But not right now. And there's also no further work for us to do on that, really. We could do a kind of technical iteration plan now, but since we're not going to work on that now, it doesn't really make sense to. So there's also nothing we can do with that issue until we decide we do want to work on it again. And we had nothing in our existing workflow that allows us to signal that in. We haven't started work and we're not going to, but we understand the problem well and what we need to do.
I think in this case, we don't really know what to do yet, because that might change depending on other work. Like, yeah.
I think that's a good point. I think like to Andreas's point as well, like what I didn't talk about in the introduction is like why we're doing this, like why we're following this process. And I think there's many reasons. One of which is as we kind of get bigger as a team, it's harder to communicate kind of priorities and to keep everyone aligned. And hopefully kind of like having like a clear picture of our roadmap and what's coming up will give everyone an opportunity to kind of have that visibility, but also ask more questions about like, is this really the next priority? Should we shift it with something else? So I think that's becoming ever more important. I also think that it's an opportunity to sort of create an environment where everyone can collaborate and contribute to the roadmap as well. I think we'll talk probably a bit more about that in terms of like the process and sort of being async first. You know, I think to make this work, it's not something that will change just like once a month when Sam and I talk about it. I think it's something that the whole team will contribute to, will have opinions on, and we'll kind of like actively talk about priorities and things like that. And again, that's something that will, I think, really be most effective if we do asynchronously as well, not just synchronously.
Yeah, and to speak a little to the opportunity backlog, that was an early attempt at this stuff kind of needs to be triaged by the team. You know, does a central container make place that's just for that? We've already pretty rapidly evolved to actually epic boards seem to make the most sense for that whole triage process. And maybe the opportunity backlog as an epic is something that we don't need and just confuses that rather than making it simple, kind of in this roadmap review.
Yeah, I really think it needs to become part of our routine as a team to discuss epics that are in triage and put forward proposals and that stuff. And in order to sort of focus that process and help us understand where we should be having that input, I think it would make sense to say that things that are in triage, things that are in proposal, we need to spend time on progressing them to the next stage, basically. And one outcome might be to put stuff into the backlog, or to progress it enough that it can go to the next stage. So that eventually the goal is to aim for as few as epics as possible in triage and proposal. Would that make sense?
Rachel, we talked about this briefly, but in the beginnings of Scalability as a single group, we had a single person responsible on the rotation for doing this triage. So for moving things either forward on the board or closing them, canceling them, whatever. Is that a process that we need to revisit, maybe reinstate or something? Do you know what happened to it?
Well, I think what happened to it is we just sort of stopped doing it. I think as the team got bigger, I think certain people just picked up certain initiatives and kept them moving and kept them going. I think there does need to be effort expended on taking triage items and either moving them forward or closing them. But I think also we as a group need to figure out which of those ones we're going to do. Like, is that okay for one person to take to make that decision of, oh, this is an idea, but no, we're not going to turn this into a project. I'm concerned that across a team, everyone on the team might not have made the same choice. So I think when there are certain things that are project sized, I don't quite know who is the right set of people to say, we need to progress these ones and not those ones. Is that something that Liam, Sam, and I do independently? Is it something that we put to certain engineers who are the experts on the particular lines of work?
That was the things that the triage rotation kind of wanted to address, and that was not making the call. That was making sure that the right people are around, like are thinking about it to make the call. So if you created an issue or an epic that I didn't understand, it was in triage, then I would reach out to you. Hey, Rachel, you still need to flesh this out because we have no idea what to do with it. And then at some point we might decide that we don't do it, but it's not the person on triage itself. It's just like, this is worth moving forward. I will ping the person again, or this is no longer relevant because we've done other things that are, replacing it. So that's like just
I think there's a process
simple things.
There's a process that's needed both at the top and the bottom of the funnel there. There's going to be a whole lot of work that is ready to go. And then a set of people need to make a decision. These are the ones that we're going to do. And then all the way on the other side, there's all the ideas coming in that need to be whittled down, triaged, built out, proposed to the point where we need to make a decision. Are we going to put enough work into these ones to make them into ready for development? So I think those two processes need to be separate. Liam, what are your thoughts?
It's a hard question to answer. The thing I'm struggling a bit with is that there's, I guess, like so many different reasons for how things how things move through the process, right? And lots of people have different ideas and initiatives for why they are. So, Sam might have a really good view on something that's important because a customer has asked for it. Nick, for example, feels very strongly at the moment about doing some of the metrics optimization stuff, which is going to bring cost benefit, but also like remove some technical debt. Stephanie's going to be doing some work on a blueprint at the moment that's going to create work around our login infrastructure. And I think it's hard at the moment, like to say like which one should take the priority over the other. I think maybe collectively between like myself and Sam, we probably have a good idea as to like what the themes are that are important for the team at the moment, and maybe this comes into kind of how we plan stuff quarterly as well. So it's like, how do we make sure that the priorities that are making their way to the top of the backlog and being triaged or going through the process line up with what's important for us as an overall team as well.
So perhaps that's something that can, I mean, we could do it on the call now, but it's also something that can happen asynchronously, is people should constantly be putting forward, I think this is important because I want to check that this is on your radar, because for example, one of the projects that I was talking to Bob with earlier in this week is about red-green error budgets. Now, that's unlikely to make it to the top unless it is advocated for by someone. And those having everyone advocate for the things that are important means that they will constantly bubble up to the top, whether they're coming from a customer says this is important, an incident has meant this is important. That's something that can happen asynchronously, is constantly putting those ones forward for review. But then do those come into meetings like this or sessions like this where we review all the things that people think are important?
I think so. And also like the round robin, IC triage process. may encourage that. If it's, hey, this week, you're on triage, go through this list. And if it's hey, as I just saw in the search, red green error budgets is not here. Why is that? And how
Because
do we kind of raise and surface that?
That's the thing. Epics versus issues. Everything starts as an issue and sometimes get turned into an epic.
I think that's a good segue, Sam. One of the things I was going to ask you to talk about, because I know you kind of put the majority of this list together, or at least I believe you did, is kind of like how you did that, right? Because some of these are just like goals or ideas, and some of them will probably fit with things that we've spoken about in terms of like the 3 to 5 year vision. Obviously, there'll probably be the things more towards the bottom, whereas some of these things are more kind of actionable, where we even have, we've invested the time to put epics together. How did you do that? Is this kind of like, is the later stuff just like a bit of a brain dump?
Yeah.
Can I jump in
Stephanie.
really quick? I put a couple things on the agenda, but apparently no one was looking
Stephanie.
at that. It's okay. One of the questions is, in fact, how does something get here? But the actual one that I think is much more important is, what's the difference between triage and proposal? Because I've found the list to it, and one of them says triage is something that we should do things with, and proposal doesn't really have a definition. Like, do we need 2 sections for that?
This is something that has come from way back, so I accept that it may be time to change this. Triage was always, here's an idea that I have, I don't know how to do this, I don't know if it's important, but it's just an idea and I'll store it and away we go. Proposal was, right, let's take that idea and actually figure out how we would do this. What would we do?
Okay.
Why?
This is important. Let's provide the information. And then someone would review that and go, oh, I've got everything I need. This is actually ready for development. Now it's just about prioritizing this work. Those are the steps to get something into ready.
Okay.
It used to be that we would go through the proposal column, review things in pairs or a couple of us together, and then say, right, we can move this over to ready.
Okay. That, I mean, it still seems like there's 2 columns that essentially both say we should do something about this, which I'm not sure we need necessarily, but I'm fine to argue that separately. Like, regardless, obviously we don't have anything that's moving things from any of these columns into ready at this point in time. And that seems like the more important thing to focus on immediately. And then my other question was the one Sam was about to ask, which was how, like, as an example, we know I can think of 3 or 4 things that are not on this list that we have talked about extensively recently that are probably not to the point of being ready, but are like run books, reorganization or splitting being one of them. Self-service for SLIs, there's been a lot of conversations about that, etc. Like, Sam can obviously add things to the list. Should we just be creating epics? Should we update this list? We should create epics, is what Sam is nodding about. So, okay, so the answer is just create epics and go from there, I guess.
I would say so. I think we want to really embrace the anyone can contribute. I would say that the manual maintenance of this epic is my accountability and responsibility. Add stuff to it by all means, but I should be held accountable for keeping this up to date and in line with what our expectations are, rather than that being an expectation of any kind of IC.
Cool. Yeah, I want to make sure that both for us and for people listening, like, we are really clear that we have a way to get things on this board, which is, as you said, create an epic. Because I know that there's been a lot of things that we've talked about, but it feels like until they're actually written down as an epic, they're never going to actually.
And maybe that's something we should do. We should level those things as epics too.
Yeah.
Just so they root in.
I think so. I think it will help with organization. I think kind of the ethos of creating epics early also means that we not only start to track stuff, but where we have ideas or discussions, we can log them against the epic as well. there's much more chance of one of these things being worked on soon rather than something that's here that doesn't have an epic created.
It also ends up having to force a little the write things down and come up with a better proposal than just this is the thing we should do. Like, it's one thing to say we should have self-service, and it's another thing to say here's an epic for that. That like one of those requires a little bit more thought. So I think pushing that further down towards the people who are invested in the idea will be helpful to get more information in a place that people can look at and use.
Would it make sense to find owners early on for those projects? Like what Bob explained for the rotation, it sounded a lot like a DRI for a particular project. On the triage state, it's kind of a rotation, right? So we're kind of also from the word triage, we're kind of, I think you quickly want to look at an idea and see if that makes sense and maybe find an owner to sort of work on a larger proposal that is more detailed, or decide that things are going to be closed or going to be backlogged perhaps. But I like to think that sort of for the proposal stage, it needs to have an owner somehow, right? Someone needs to pick it up and sort of work on that and detail the proposal, or find the right people to do that. But in the DRI sense,
that's what we used to do. So when something was in triage, you were on triage rotation, and you said, okay, I'm now going to look at this issue or epic or project. You assign it to yourself, write a bunch of stuff, and then if you were the one that wrote a bunch of stuff, then you wouldn't be the one that would move it to ready, because it needs to be clear for anybody to work on. So that's how that process used to work. So when you say owner, I'm kind of like reluctant, because I think it shouldn't be, as was mentioned before, it shouldn't be like a single person making that call, like now this is ready to be worked on.
But some sort of quorum that says, yeah, this is ready, I could pick this up in theory.
I would say that I don't think that the fleshing out of projects is something that belongs in a triage rotation. Like, I'm just gonna state that I don't think that belongs in a triage rotation. I think that belongs with the person who is putting the project forward, or the subject matter expert on whatever this is. I do think that pushing it forward should not be that person's, like, somebody else should read this over, etc. But for me, I would say I like the idea of there being an owner for an epic, with the caveat that DRI generally means for epics the person who is going to do the work. And I do not think that is necessarily the person who needs to write it up.
Yeah, I think that the DRI can change. I think that you can have someone who's going to write it up, and you can have a different, and then the DRI assignment changes to be the person who's going to lead the execution of the idea. But I agree with you that it shouldn't be the person that's on triage. And the reason for that is that if the triage rotation would change, if there's 8 people in the team, certain of these ideas aren't going to be worked on for 8 weeks because the person just doesn't know. Like, they might not be the sidekick, like have a massive knowledge about sidekick. So they're just not really going to pick it up. They're going to look at the other ones that they feel more comfortable with, and those are the ones that are going to be pushed forward. Meanwhile, if it's the responsibility of the whole team to be moving forward the epics that are assigned to them on a regular basis, I think there will be more progress than having it be one person doing it all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And triage can be more focused on, not to get too Stack Overflowy, but yeah, this is a duplicate, it's covered in here. Or, by the way, we have this massive tenant observability foundations thing. This should be part of that project, and we can kind of look at that. And that, I think, is where a triage rotation should be more focused in. Hey, this doesn't make sense. Can you expand here?
So the question then comes down to how this is going to be executed inside of the team. So does that mean if you are a DRI, you can only be the DRI on one project, regardless of whether you are executing a project or planning a project? You can only be DRI for one thing at a time? Or can you be a DRI on both an execution and a planning thing at the same time?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to limit, like, for example, Andreas is the DRI for the tenant observability. I would expect he's also the DRI for whatever the next tenant observability piece is coming up. And like, I would imagine that he would do planning at the same time. Theoretically, if I was further along, logging would probably fall into the same sort of bucket. Like, we're working on a technical blueprint, but also there's another epic that's going to come that says, do the work.
So then a following question from that is, how do we make sure that work is moving beyond the ready stage? Like, there's work happening and there's work being planned, so that we have enough work ready when the current ready stuff is finished.
I'll offer a suggestion. I don't know if it'll work though, but I think that probably what makes the most sense at this point in time is to say to the entire team, hey, all the projects that you have ever thought of, that you have enough information to make into an epic, let's make them. And it probably makes sense to have a broader conversation about a triage rotation or something of this, both for epics and for like issues that come in, which is unrelated to this thing, but is something that essentially falls on the floor at this point in time. But I would say, like, this needs to be a habit, like Andreas has said multiple times. It needs to be a thing that we continue to work on. Having the ability to assign epics to someone would make this a lot easier, but we're not quite there yet, but I saw it's moving forward. I do think it just needs to be a thing that we do as a team.
I think we need to have visibility into the things that we currently care about. This is what I kind of expected what I expect from the roadmap review also to deliver, is for us to have an idea that those are the 4 projects that we are currently care about the most, and that we might pick up in the next quarter, and therefore we need to spend time on detailing them. So currently there is like perhaps 15 projects in proposal and triage. Ideally, we would have a couple of them, and we would continuously work on detailing and progressing them as a team. So this could be one outcome of this meeting, is that regularly we're kind of, and also the sort of the ASIC discussion before that, we determine what are the projects that are important for us to detail going forward.
And I think that is a thing where we could use backlog a lot more extensively and say, like, something that's in proposal or something that's in triage is something that we think we will work on within the next year. Otherwise, it goes in backlog. I don't think that we're at a point now where we can plan a year ahead and reasonably flesh out an epic and have it be anything like accurate. So I think for me anyways, and I'm not sure if this is true for the rest of the team, but I found that this often works. Having a time period that we say, not just will we do this soon or not, but are we going to do this in the next year? No, we're not. Okay, then it goes on the backlog, and it's a idea list for the future. Things that would go in the next year, we should flesh out.
But I think it's also okay to have some of those kind of things in the later sections. They're a bit more nebulous in, hey, this is upcoming in the next year, or like in a late quarter. And that gives me some visibility about, I know I need to go work on this. And when I know more, flesh it out and get it into a ready state. But right now, we're not prepared to do that because we're going to learn so much in the next 2 quarters that it may all change. So we don't want to waste effort either. But we can put a kind of, nebulous thing in. I've done it a little for the runway roadmap, which I'm just going to share here and then link into the doc. But where, for this new runtime we're developing, we know we want to get it to GA at some point and be able to roll out and do an AI gateway transition. What that will look like, I have absolutely no idea, but we're probably not going to start to think about that until Q4 at the earliest, or Q1 next year. And that gives us some kind of forethought about, okay, well, in this quarter, assuming we've gone into the future a bit, I need to develop that epic or that project a bit further so it's ready for when I want to pick it up, kind of thing.
Okay, so we're at time. So thanks everyone for your patience on us going over slightly. I think there's a few things here in terms of next steps. I think Andreas, I think it was a really good shout that we have an outcome of like asynchronously us determining like which projects do we think are important as being next up, making sure we have epics created and DRIs assigned to them. So I think that's something that we can do over the next few days, and I'm happy to drive that. I think there are a few kind of process suggestions, sort of improvements as well around making sure that we create epics early, assigning owners like DRIs to them, having sort of slightly better documentation as well around what the workflow process is and how things move through that and out the priority list, I think will be helpful. So I think there's probably a few MRs that will be created off the back of that. One thing that I'm mindful of, Sam, I believe you have your version of this with practices tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
So I'll be very interested to hear feedback on that in terms of like what similar problems we have, what overlap there is, whether there's other ideas to solve sort of the same problems. Equally, it feels like there's an opportunity for us to maybe have another one of these sessions in a couple of weeks' time where we focus less on sort of how things work, but maybe slightly more in a detail as to what the priorities are, how the team think about that, whether there's agreement, disagreement, etc. I'm also cautious that it's impossible to get the whole team on a call at once. So trying to be inclusive of everyone. I want to try and keep either syncs to a minimum or find a way where we can like have kind of like multiple slots or something like that to get everyone involved. I will work with Sam on those things around kind of getting feedback from tomorrow's and setting up a future session where we can go through this in a bit more detail as well.
I am, assuming that you're okay with this, Liam, going to open up an issue about a triage rotation discussion, which is relevant to this, but also relevant to several other things. And I have some feelings on it. So I'm going to dump that all in an issue and I'll share it in the channel when it exists.
That's the way to do it, Stephanie. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. Good to see you all, and we'll catch up soon.